I still remember exactly where I was when the call came through. It was a Tuesday morning, 8:13 a.m. I had just poured myself a cup of coffee in the office kitchen, my usual blend, dark roast with 2 sugars, and was heading back to my desk when my phone buzzed. I glanced down, saw it was Ian calling, and smiled. Ian Vickers, my best friend since college, co-founder of our startup, and until recently, the closest thing I had to a brother. We'd built everything together. Shared code. Ideas, pizza at 3 a.m., even that one awful apartment in Palo Alto with the broken heater and the raccoon in the attic. So when he called, I answered without hesitation. "Hey man," I said, tucking the phone between my shoulder and ear while juggling my coffee and laptop. There was a pause on the line, long enough for my stomach to tense up, then Ian's voice. Colder than I'd ever heard it. "Eli, I'm going to need you to come to the 10th floor conference room. Now." Just 6 words. No warmth. No context. "Is everything okay?" I asked, setting my coffee down on a side table. My fingers were suddenly trembling. "Just come up," he said. Then the line went dead. The moment I stepped into that conference room, I knew Ian was sitting at the end of the long table, flanked by Mark, the new investor liaison, and Julia from HR, who had never once looked me in the eye in 3 years. There was a folder on the table in front of them, and a legal pad. Ian didn't stand. Didn't smile. Just gestured to the chair across from him. "What's going on?" I asked, keeping my voice level, though my heart was hammering. Ian folded his hands. "We're letting you go." I blinked. "What?" Julia cleared her throat. "Your contract has a 30-day termination clause. We're invoking it effective immediately. Today will be your last day in the building. Your severance." "Wait, what the hell are you talking about?" I snapped. "I'm the CTO. I built the infrastructure. I architected 90% of the platform." Ian leaned back, and for a moment, there was a flicker of discomfort in his eyes. Then it was gone. "We appreciate everything you've done, Eli. But the board feels it's time for a different direction. More structured. More scalable." "Scalable?" I laughed, the sound bitter and cracked. "You mean the product I coded from scratch? The AI pipeline you barely understand? You're firing me, and what? Just gonna hand my work off to some guy with an MBA and a GitHub account?" Julia shifted uncomfortably. Ian looked away. Mark spoke up, finally. "We're bringing in external consultants. Experienced operators. No offense, Eli, but we think the company's outgrown its founding team." I looked at Ian. Really looked at him. This was the guy who called me crying when his girlfriend dumped him. The guy who slept on my couch for 2 months when his dad cut him off. The guy who begged me to leave my stable job at Oracle to build Neuron Sync, a startup that promised to revolutionize predictive scheduling for medical networks. We were supposed to build this thing together. "You told me this was ours," I said, my voice low. "That you couldn't do it without me." He stood, finally. "I guess I was wrong." Security escorted me out less than 20 minutes later. My badge was deactivated. My email wiped. My Slack account gone. Just like that, I became a ghost in the very building I had helped design. I didn't leave the office building that day. I fled. I made it as far as the parking garage before the panic really set in. I collapsed into the driver's seat of my old Mazda, closed the door, and screamed. Not words. Just sound. Raw, guttural pain erupting from my chest. The echo bounced off the cement walls and came right back at me like a cruel reminder. I wasn't just fired. I'd been erased. Everything I'd built for the last 3 years, gone. The platform, the patents, the investors I pitched to, the codebase I stayed up nights debugging. The dream Ian and I shared, and the sweat I poured into every product release, it all belonged to them now, because I had trusted Ian, and I hadn't protected myself. I didn't even realize I was crying until my phone buzzed again. A text from Ian. "No hard feelings. Hope we can still be friends." Friends? I threw the phone across the car. It bounced off the passenger door and clattered to the floor. For the next several minutes, I just sat there, shaking. I wasn't sure if I was humiliated or heartbroken. Maybe both. By the time I drove home, it was past 3 p.m. The sun was sharp and cruel overhead. My apartment felt too bright, too clean. Like a stranger lived there. I sat on the floor of my living room, still in my button-up and slacks, and stared at nothing. The silence was deafening. Then I remembered something my dad once said, before he passed away from cancer my senior year of college. "If they bury you, son, make sure they know you're a seed." At the time, I thought it was a cheesy metaphor. Now, I clung to it like a life raft. I spent the next few days spiraling. I barely ate. Barely slept. I refreshed LinkedIn like it owed me something. Watched in horror as Ian updated his profile, CEO. At Neuron Sync, leading AI innovation in healthcare scheduling. No mention of me. No photo of the two of us shaking hands after our first $2 million funding round. Just him. I tried to reach out to a few of our old colleagues, people I'd hired. mentored, defended when Ian wanted to let them go. Most were polite. One or two said they were sorry to hear and that they hoped I'd land on my feet. But no one offered anything more than words. The tech world moves fast. And no one wants to touch a co-founder who's been ousted. I'd gone from visionary to liability overnight, and worse, I couldn't even rebuild my work. Because it wasn't mine anymore, the IP was tied to the company. Legally, I couldn't touch any of the architecture I'd written, any of the ML models I'd trained, or the scheduling logic I'd obsessed over for years. It was all locked behind NDAs and non-competes I had stupidly signed in the early days, back when Ian said we were in this together. I was broke, bitter, and dangerously close to giving up until I got an email. Subject, looking to catch up? It was from Kara, my old team lead from Oracle. She was working at a mid-size biotech startup. Now, still in the Bay. We hadn't talked in years. Her message was simple: heard what happened. Coffee? I almost deleted it. But something stopped me. Maybe it was pride. Or maybe it was desperation dressed up as curiosity. We met at a quiet cafe in Mountain View. She looked the same, sharp eyes, confident posture, no time for BS. She didn't waste time either. Ian screwed you, she said after the first sip of her latte. I didn't argue. He was always jealous of your skill. Even back at Stanford. You remember that time your algorithm outperformed his by 30% and he spent the whole week pretending it was flawed? I nodded, surprised. I hadn't thought about that in years. I also remember you fixing his thesis code behind the scenes and never asking for credit. I blinked. How do you know about that? Ian told me. Bragged about it like he'd been generous to you. Said he let you help because you were a loyal friend. I felt a fresh wave of nausea. Eli, she said, leaning forward. You didn't lose. Not yet. You just got played. So play back. What do you mean? Build something better. You don't need neuron sync. You are neuron sync. Ian can't replicate your mind. He doesn't get the tech. But you do. You know what the system lacked. You know how to make it stronger. Faster. Smarter. I shook my head. I can't use the same code. The IP, I didn't say copy it. I said build something new. Something. Yours. That night, for the first time in a week, I slept, and when I woke up, I started sketching, not code, yet. But ideas, because if they thought they'd buried me, they had no idea what kind of seed I was. Starting over at 34 isn't the same as starting fresh at 24.at24, I had ambition and caffeine. At 34, I had trauma, scars, and just enough anger to burn through doubt, but Kara was right. I couldn't replicate neuron sync. I couldn't touch a single line of that code, or I'd risk legal action. But what I could do, what Ian would never be able to do, was innovate. Improve. Think. Because Ian had built a company around a product. I had built the product itself, and I knew exactly where its weaknesses were. The old model was decent, sure. But it was fragile, inflexible, and optimized only for hospital environments. What if I could expand it? Make it useful not just for giant systems, but for small clinics, private practices, mobile health services? A platform that learned across networks, adjusted for local availability, traffic patterns, doctor preferences, patient reliability scores. I was designing something more powerful than a scheduler. I was building an intelligent care orchestrator, and this time, it would be mine. I started small. My apartment became a war room. Whiteboards leaned against every wall, cluttered with logic flows and prototype schematics. Empty ramen cups stacked in corners. My laptop never closed. I applied for a research grant under a new LLC, CareMap Solutions. Kara introduced me to a friend at a local AI incubator who gave me free desk space and access to GPU credits. I traded a few weeks of consulting for an open-source DevOps tool in exchange for compute time. I stretched every dollar like it was my last, which it nearly was, and I worked, I worked, sometimes 18 hours a day, sometimes more, not because I had something to prove to Ian anymore, but because I had something to prove to myself, that I was never just the technical guy. That I could survive betrayal. That I could build something better without the slick pitch decks and boardroom theater, and slowly, it started to come together. 2 months in, I had my first working demo. It was raw, barely functional, but the core logic ran 30% faster than the original model I built for Neuron Sync. The UI was cleaner, the architecture more modular, and I'd implemented a federated learning layer that protected patient data across clinics while still enabling network-wide optimization. I called it NovaCare, because I wanted it to feel like a rebirth. A new light after the collapse. I pitched my first client in a dingy co-working space. Dr. Sienna Ramos, head of a network of free clinics in Southern California. She was skeptical of me, of the tech, of the fact that I didn't even have a logo yet, but when I walked her through the demo, something shifted. You mean it learns? Per site, she asked, and per provider, per patient type, per time of day, I said. The more data it gets, the smarter it gets. With zero added burden to your staff. And it works on tablets? Even your receptionist's iPhone. She nodded slowly, eyes narrowed. Okay, she said. I'll give you one clinic. You prove it works in 30 days, I'll give you 5. That night, I didn't celebrate. I didn't post on social media or tell Kara or even open a beer. I sat in my dark apartment, staring at the blinking cursor on my screen, and let out one long, slow breath. This wasn't revenge, this was resurrection. 3 weeks after launching NovaCare's pilot with Dr. Ramos' clinic, I got a LinkedIn message I wasn't expecting. Hey Eli. Off the record, what the hell happened between you and Ian? Things are not great here. Trevor had been Neuron Sync's lead backend engineer. Quiet, reliable, brilliant in his own understated way. I hadn't spoken to him since the day I was fired. I stared at the message for a few seconds. Before replying, define, not great, his answer came fast, schedulers crashing daily. The AI pipeline hasn't updated in 2 months. Ian hired 2 new chief technologists, but neither of them can make sense of the model architecture. I warned him, but he said it's your fault for not documenting enough. I laughed out loud. Not the funny kind, the kind that burns in your chest. Of course Ian would say that. Never mind the 150-page design doc I had shared. The annotated source code. The internal wiki I had personally built and maintained. What he meant was, Eli didn't stay behind to explain the magic trick. But there was no trick. Just a decade of knowledge, intuition, and hard-earned mistakes baked into every line. You can't just fire that and expect the system to hum along. Trevor kept typing. He's talking about re-architecting from scratch. 6 months of work, minimum. The board's getting nervous. I hesitated, then typed, let me guess, AI performance is down 40%, and latency's up across the board 42%. And yes. How did you know? Because I built it. And I knew its breaking points. It was like watching a plane fly into turbulence with the wrong pilot. It hadn't crashed yet, but it was circling, low on fuel, with smoke trailing from both wings. Trevor, I'm sorry you're stuck there. If you ever want out, let me know. NovaCare's expanding. He didn't respond right away. When he did, it was only 2 words, might soon. Meanwhile, NovaCare was thriving. Dr. Ramos' clinic reported a 27% drop in missed appointments within the first 3 weeks. Provider satisfaction was up. Wait times were down. She called me personally the following Monday. You've got 5 clinics now, she said. And if this scales the way I think it will, you'll have 50 by next year. It was the first time I allowed myself to feel something like pride again. I hung up, stared at the terminal window still running my diagnostics, and whispered to myself, you did it, not we. Not the company. 2 days later, I saw the headline, Neuron Sync hit with series of cancellations following tech woes. TechMind's weekly. I clicked. The article was brutal. Several hospital systems have paused or canceled their contracts with Neuron Sync amid persistent outages and complaints about algorithmic inaccuracies in appointment scheduling. Sources close to the matter cite internal restructuring and technical mismanagement as key issues. I scrolled further and nearly choked on my coffee. A quote from Ian himself. We're transitioning toward a more scalable and modernized version of the platform, and we're confident our new architecture will outperform the previous legacy systems. Legacy. He called my work, the very codebase that landed him $5 million in Series A legacy system. It was laughable, but something told me he wasn't laughing, especially when, 2 hours later, I got a message from a number I didn't recognize. Hey, Ian here. Can we talk? I stared at the message for a full minute, as if it might evaporate if I blinked. Ian here. Can we talk? No apology. No context. Just the man who'd gutted me with a smile and a handshake, now knocking, digitally, on my door. I didn't reply, not immediately. Instead, I set my phone down, went for a walk, and let the cold October air clear my thoughts. The irony was so thick it felt scripted. The man who had ousted me from my own creation was now watching it fall apart, and I knew exactly what he wanted. He didn't want to talk. He wanted to borrow my brain again. When I got back to my apartment, I poured a glass of water, sat at my desk, and typed 3 words, what about? His response came instantly, you probably saw the headlines. Things have gotten complicated here. I waited. I was wondering if you'd be open to consulting. Short term. Just to help us stabilize a few things. There it was, the desperation tucked behind corporate language. I didn't reply for 2 hours. Then, you mean the systems you said outgrew me? That was a mistake. I should have handled it differently. You deserved better. I nearly laughed. It wasn't an apology. It was a bid. Let's talk tomorrow. 10 a.m. Your office. His reply was quick. Appreciate it. I'll have Julia set it up. Julia. The HR puppet who sat across from me the day they kicked me out. I wondered if she even remembered the look on my face. That day, the next morning, I dressed deliberately, not in a suit, no. That would feel like playing his game. Instead, I wore a dark tee, jeans, and my old gray hoodie. The one I wore on launch day, back when we were still we. If I was going to walk into the lion's den, I wanted to do it as the version of me they had underestimated, the version who'd survived. When I walked into Neuron Sync's glassy, open-concept lobby, the receptionist blinked in surprise. "Mr. Eli Carter." "That's right. Ian's expecting me." She picked up the phone and murmured something, then gestured, "Floor 10. The elevator ride felt surreal. As if I'd slipped back into a dream, or maybe a nightmare. Same walls. Same floor. Same fake ferns by the windows, but something was different. Quieter. No buzz of engineers, no chatter of product meetings. Just tension in the air, like a storm waiting to break. When I entered the conference room, Ian stood up, looking older. Not visibly, but in energy. His posture was slumped. His eyes tired. "Eli," he said. "Thanks for coming." I didn't shake his hand. Saturday. He cleared his throat. "I'll be honest, we're in trouble. The systems aren't performing. Clients are frustrated. The board is breathing down my neck. And, we need help." "Define help." "You know this architecture better than anyone. It was your vision. We've tried to rework it, but we're chasing our tails. No one can get the prediction layer stable. The optimization routines are degrading." I raised an eyebrow. "Did you try rewriting the dynamic weighting from scratch without understanding the statistical fault tolerance built into the original matrices?" He blinked. I think they may have." I shook my head. "That was the spine. You amputated the spine and replaced it with guesswork." Ian's jaw clenched, but he didn't argue. "Look," he said, lowering his voice. "I screwed up. Firing you was a mistake. The board wanted structure, polish, someone with more executive experience. I let them push you out, and I didn't fight it. That's on me." I stayed silent. He continued, "But we can fix this. You can come back. As CTO. Full title. Autonomy. Name your salary." He said it like he was offering me a crown, but all I saw was a burning throne, built on ash and betrayal. I leaned forward. "Ian, tell me something honestly." He nodded, guarded. "If I hadn't built the original model, if I hadn't architected the whole stack, written the prediction engine, tuned the neural network by hand, where would you be? Right now?" His face was still, then he said, quietly, "Screwed." "Exactly. I stood. "Thanks for the offer," I said. "But I'm not coming back to rebuild a house you burned down with my name still carved into the foundation." He stood too, hurriedly. "Wait, just think about it. We can find a way to make this right." I looked him in the eye. "I already did." Then I walked out, feeling lighter than I had in years. Walking out of that boardroom wasn't a victory. It was a funeral, for the old me, the version of Eli Carter who begged for validation from people who saw him as a tool, not a partner. The man who confused loyalty with silence. The man who thought being needed was the same as being valued. That man died the day Ian fired me. The one walking out of Neuron Sync was someone else entirely. Within 2 weeks, NovaCare wasn't just surviving, it was exploding. Dr. Ramos referred us to a regional clinic network in Oregon. From there, a medical device manufacturer approached us about embedding our scheduler into their telehealth kits, and then came the call I hadn't dared hope for. A message in my inbox, subject line, "Interest in strategic partnership, Palisade Health." Palisade was one of the largest private healthcare providers on the West Coast. Thousands of clinics. Tens of thousands of practitioners. A logistics nightmare that could only be tamed by AI. We set up a meeting. Their VP of Innovation, Madeline Price, joined the Zoom call sharp at 9 a.m. No nonsense, blazer and glasses, and a tone that said, "I don't have time for vaporware." "Let's get one thing straight," she said after 5 minutes. "We've been burned before. Neuron Sync promised the world. Gave us delays and excuses." I smiled. "That's because they didn't understand the medicine. Just the math." Her eyes narrowed. "And you do?" "I lived it. I built their engine. Then I watched it crash from the outside. And now I've built something better, because I finally had the freedom to do it right." She didn't blink. "Show me." I walked her through NovaCare, our real-time scheduling engine. Our adaptive provider preference learning. Our smart failover for cancellations. Our privacy layer that respected HIPAA and physician bandwidth. When I finished, she didn't speak for a long moment. "Then, you're not a vendor." "No," I said. "I'm a solution." By the end of the week, we signed a 6-month paid pilot with Palisade, not a free trial. Not a handshake. A contract. A commitment. Real money. It was our biggest deal yet, and the timing couldn't have been more poetic, because that same afternoon, TechMinds Weekly dropped another bombshell. Neuron Sync layoffs hit 60% as platform crisis deepens, the article cited internal turmoil, massive client losses, and anonymous sources blaming fundamental architectural misunderstandings at the core of the company's AI product. Translation: the house I built couldn't stand once I was gone. That night, I sat on my balcony, laptop closed, watching the city flicker. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt calm. The storm had passed. And I was still standing, and I realized something. This wasn't about Ian anymore. It wasn't even about Neuron Sync. It was about me finally becoming the kind of leader I had spent years pretending I didn't want to be, not the loudest in the room, not the one with the flashy title, but the one who knew how to build something that worked, and how to protect it. Success has a strange echo. It doesn't sound like applause. It sounds like email notifications, calendar pings, and half a dozen VC firms suddenly pretending they've always believed in you. By mid-March, NovaCare was no longer a prototype. We were a real company, with 5 full-time engineers, 2 ops managers, a legal team, and more pilot programs than I could track without a spreadsheet. Kara had officially joined as COO, Trevor left Neuron Sync and became our head of infrastructure, and I, reluctantly, had started calling myself CEO. Then came the offer from Apex Core, a massive digital health conglomerate based out of Boston. They requested a private call, sent over NDAs, scheduled a virtual, fireside chat that somehow had 5 executives and a VP of M&A on it. 30 minutes in, they said the words I'd been waiting years to hear: we'd like to acquire NovaCare. I didn't respond right away. So they clarified, we're talking low 8 figures, with retention bonuses and earnouts. You'd remain as head of product, but we'd fold NovaCare into our digital health division. Translation: they wanted to buy what we built, strip it down, integrate it into something bigger, slower, safer. Something theirs. I thanked them and asked for time to consider. That night, Kara came by with Thai takeout and a 6-pack. We ate on the floor of my apartment, the way we had back in the early Oracle days when both of us were too broke for real furniture. $10 million, I said between bites of pad CEW. That's life-changing. For some people, she said, sipping her beer. Is it for you? I didn't answer. She leaned forward. You already know the product works. You already know the market's hungry. The only question left is, do you want to sell the baby, or raise it? I chuckled. Since when do you speak in metaphors? Since I started working with founders who forget they're allowed to dream bigger. I looked around at the whiteboards, the sticky notes, the sketches taped to my walls. NovaCare wasn't just tech. It was mine. It was me. The next morning, I called Apex Core. Thank you for the offer, I said. It's flattering. But NovaCare isn't for sale. Not right now. There was a pause on the other end. Then, that's disappointing. You may not get this kind of offer again. I smiled. I plan to make sure I do. By April, Palisade Health expanded our contract. By May, we signed our first international client. By June, we were in talks with the Department of Veterans Affairs, and somewhere in the middle of all that, TechMind's Weekly ran one final headline: Neuron Sync acquired in quiet fire sale. CEO steps down amidst backlash. Ian was gone. No press conference. No redemption arc. Just a quiet exit through the back door of a building he no longer owned. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel pity. I felt closure. 6 months later, I got invited to speak at Stanford. It was surreal, walking across the campus where Ian and I once sketched wireframes on napkins, fueled by Red Bull and delusion. The same campus where I sat in lecture halls, dreaming of changing the world, never realizing how often the world would try to change me instead. The event was hosted by the School of Engineering. Topic: from technical co-founder to visionary leader, navigating betrayal, burnout, and breakthroughs. Yeah. They didn't hold back. The lecture hall was packed. Students, faculty, a few startup nerds who probably snuck in for the free pizza. I stood at the podium, heart steady, voice clear, and I told the truth. I told them how I got fired from the company I helped build. How I signed away my rights because I trusted someone who didn't deserve it. How I cried in a parking garage. How I almost gave up, and how, when the silence finally settled, I decided to start over, not out of revenge, but because I remembered who I was when no one was watching. Afterward, a girl with nervous eyes and a laptop full of stickers approached me. I'm building something with 2 friends, she said. But I'm scared. One of them already tried to register the company under his name without telling us. I looked her dead in the eye. Get a lawyer. Get everything in writing. And don't wait until things go bad to protect yourself. She nodded quickly, like she'd been holding her breath for weeks. Then she asked, do you ever regret trusting the wrong person? I paused. Only when I forget how much stronger it made me. That night, I sat outside under a different sky. No noise. No blinking screens. Just a notebook in my hand, like the old days. I wrote down 3 things. I was never just the code. I built something worth protecting. Next time, I choose who gets to build with me. I didn't need applause. I didn't need revenge. I had something better apiece, and that, for the first time in a long time, felt like the real win.